Alright, let's keep rolling on our walkthrough for Hoard of the Dragon Queen, Book 1 in the Tyranny of Dragons campaign. Today we're covering Chapter 4, On the Road. I'm Dad the Dungeon Master. I've been a DM for over a decade. I am a published author and I have run this campaign for multiple groups, so I've made every mistake and I'm going to help you guys avoid those. So let's dig in. So the monk Leosin told the party that whenever they got finished at the raiders' camp and found out what was happening, to meet him in the town of Elturel. Your party will head back through Greenest because it's on the way to Elturel. And when they get there, they can return whatever treasure that they got from the raiders' camp, and they find out that the monk actually paid for horses and gear for the horses for them to make the trip to Elturel faster. It's about 200 miles, and the party with the horses and supplies that the monk paid for, they can make that trip in about 6 days. Now, the book says that you can add random encounters to this trip and make it a little more interesting. I kind of created my own mechanic for determining random encounters. Anytime my party is traveling, I have them roll percentiles once a day. And depending on how dangerous the area is the percentage chance that they will have an encounter. If it's extremely dangerous, if they're going through one of the layers of the 9 hells, there's going to be like a 90% chance of an encounter. If they're traveling through the green fields and there's not really that much going on, there's like a 10% chance of an encounter. And even if there is an encounter, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be combat. It could be all different types of things. So what I like to do for this little first journey to Elturel is I keep it kind of low intensity. If they roll above a 90, I will have an encounter, but I will make it like somebody's wagon wheel is broken on the side of the road and they're worried that bandits are going to come and they want the party's help. I'm never actually going to have anything dangerous happen, but I want the party to kind of feel like it's a possibility because anytime you're in the wild in the Forgotten Realms, there is a possibility of something dangerous happening. But I really want to slowly build the tension over the course of the chapter. When the party gets to Elturel, if they ask about Leosin, nobody seems to know who they're talking about. But if they ask about his friend, Onthar Frume, they are directed to the Order of the Gauntlet headquarters that's in a tavern called A Pair of Black Antlers. The book says that as long as you arrive in Elturel within a 10-day, that Leosin is there. But there's really no reason for it to take your party longer than that. They probably took a long rest when they got back to Greenest from the raiders' camp because they were probably pretty messed up. And then they spent 6 days on the road. So 7 days, maybe it takes them 8 if something weird happens. But there's really no good reason for him not to be there either. The book doesn't explain where he goes after that. So I think it works best to just have Leosin here no matter how long it takes your party. And based on the next mission that your party gets, time is sort of a factor, but not really. You've got like a 2-week window to spare. So I just always have Leosin here. Onthar Frume is a large, jovial warrior with a big beard and a big body. The book says you'll enjoy spending time with him as long as you enjoy constant drinking games and arm wrestling and horseback riding contests and sparring and weapons training, which at least some, if not most of your party will love. The book does have like a fun side little mini game here, but it kind of feels like offbeat compared to the way the story is kind of building. So they add like a little side message from Leosin. The way that the book has you progress to the next step is you have to impress Onthar Frume through these contests, and it says to use opposing skill checks between either him or one of his men when the party's competing in the arm wrestling or the horseback riding or whatever, or just run combat one-on-one with one of his men whenever they're sparring. And if your party impresses him with these contests, that one evening when things are winding down, he will invite the party to a private meeting. Your party is going to feel like this is wasting time whenever the cult is out doing their thing, when they know that Caravan is headed north and they know that they should probably be trying to catch up with it. So the book has Leosin pull the party to the side and explain to them that impressing Onthar Frume is probably in their best interest in the long run. So I've had parties kind of go both ways on this section. Some parties are like, oh yeah, we get to play side mini games, kind of like in It Takes Two where you have those little side games you get to play, and they love it. Whereas some of my parties want to take the main story a little more serious. They don't like just feeling like they're wasting time. So for those parties, I have Leosin pull them to the side and be like, this is important even though it doesn't seem like it. For the other parties, I just let them have fun, and then eventually they're like, oh wait, this really matters? Okay. So when Onthar Frume pulls your party into that private meeting, him and Leosin sit them down and explain that Leosin is a part of the Harpers, which if you've seen the D&D movie, you know who the Harpers are. They're like a secret agent guild of spies and rogues and informants, but they are good guys. They're secret agents for good. They are widespread. Their agents have a lot of freedom to act independently, and their overall goal is the good of all the Sword Coast. Onthar Frume is a member of the Order of the Gauntlet. They share a lot of the same morals as the Harpers, but they handle things differently. They're more openly warriors. They're more openly opposed to evil. They're mostly clerics and paladins to Torm, the god of justice, and they have a much more structured, orderly, hierarchical system than the Harpers do. The two groups are currently in agreement with a third group called the Emerald Enclave, which is like druids and people who love nature that want to preserve the natural order. They don't necessarily see mankind's goals as good or evil. They want the natural order to remain. But for the time being, all three groups agree that the Cult of the Dragon is up to some bad stuff and needs to be stopped. They will explain to the party that the cult used to be all about turning dragons into Dracoliches, but that a new leader arose in the Cult of the Dragon not that long ago, and it seems like their goals have shifted. They don't know what the goals are, so they are hoping that the party will meet up with the caravan of stolen loot that is going to be going through Baldur's Gate. And they want the party to head to Baldur's Gate. Onthar Frume has a boat that's going to take them down the river Chionthar to get to Baldur's Gate. He has contacts that will help them get signed on as guards. It says that maybe if not with the cult wagons, they can sign on with another merchant as guards for the trip north and travel as part of a large caravan of which the Cult of the Dragon wagons are going to be traveling with. They're going to be hiding what they're doing. They're going to be going north from Baldur's Gate to Waterdeep. And they want the party to get integrated into that caravan, travel with them to find out what they're doing, where they're headed. The book says that Leosin and Onthar Frume will offer membership into their orders with the party. I personally like to have this be a little bit separate, and I like to have it be a little bit more individual. I like to have Leosin approach members of the party who are good, but would fit more into like a spy type organization like rogues, rangers, things like that, which a ranger could be a part of the Emerald Enclave also, and specifically pull them separate from the party and offer them membership. I like to have Onthar Frume pick out members of the party who are a little bit more like warriors or paladins and also show that desire for justice and offer them membership in the Order of the Gauntlet. Now, I know this seems like it might make the party members who don't get offered feel bad, but I like to do it so that they will get a chance to join other factions later. That way, everybody's not a member of the same faction, which can be cool, but it also feels a little bit like if everybody has it, then it's not that special. And I want the party to feel like the way that they've played their characters has led them to be appealing to one of these groups. I'll explain later, I'm going to give them a chance to join the Zhentarim, which they are sort of evil, but they also, their goals line up with good guys sometimes. And one of your party members might not be entirely noble or good, so they might want to be part of like a more seedy organization. It depends on your players, the way they're playing their characters. And then I also include a chance for them to join the Emerald Enclave. If you have a druid or a ranger and they really want to protect nature, they would fit more into that group. That way everybody can get a chance to be a part of a faction, but it doesn't make it not really feel special when everybody like, oh, you can all join the Harpers if you want, you can all join the Order of the Gauntlet if you want, because they probably wouldn't all actually qualify for those factions if they weren't a part of your party. You know what I mean? Also, the book doesn't mention again about them getting paid by Leosin for the stuff he asked them to do in the Raiders camp. So remember to make sure he pays your party. They will probably remember, so they'll probably remind you, but if they don't, make sure they get their pay. The trip down the river to Baldur's Gate takes 3 days, and Onthar Frume will both give the party new gear. I assume he means armor and like adventuring gear and new weapons if they want it. He's not going to give them like magical items, but at this point I would let your party upgrade their armor a little bit. Like if they're using leather armor, let them go to studded leather. If they're using a chain shirt or scale mail, let them bump up to a breastplate. If they're using ring mail or chain mail, let them bump up to splint. That way they get to upgrade their AC by 1, but they're not getting these powerful magical items that will completely unbalance your game. The trip down the river takes 3 days. or 2 days if the boat chooses to drive at night, but there's no reason to do that. You've got plenty of time to beat the caravan there. The book again says that this part of the trip is uneventful, but if you want to include some things to make your party uneasy, maybe some things bump the hull of the boat as they travel, maybe they see some floating lights on the shore at night, just keep the tension, but it should be slowly building at this point. This chapter has a little bit of a slower pace, but I love the caravan part going from Baldur's Gate to Waterdeep. It has some of the best NPCs, some of the best morally gray choices, and it just has a different vibe from any other chapter in any other book. It's not just a dungeon, it's not just going shopping, it's its own thing, and it really has a nice vibe to it. They include a lot of stuff that you kind of have to know what to do with, but it's a lot of fun. So your party arrives in Baldur's Gate, and if they've played Baldur's Gate 3, which I think there's a pretty decent chance that your party has at this point, they're going to be super excited about being in Baldur's Gate. There's 3 sections of Baldur's Gate: the upper city, the lower city, and the outer city. Worm's Crossing from Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the outer city, like the suburbs basically. The area that your party's going to end up going to is called the Blackgate. It's another part of the outer city. Baldur's Gate is interesting in that the way that it's set up is the streets are so steep and narrow that wagons can't travel through town. They literally don't allow pack animals or horses or even dogs into the city. So it's kind of uniquely set up so that anybody bringing freight north from the south has to unload all their freight, carry it with porters through the city, and load it onto new wagons to head north. And the same with stuff coming down the river or coming in from the sea. They can't just travel through. Everything has to be unloaded, carried, reloaded, and then sent on its way. So most people sell their wares when they get to Baldur's Gate, whether they're coming from the north, the south, or the river, whatever, and then they buy a second freight to take back where they were headed. So most people come to Baldur's Gate, sell their stuff, buy new stuff to transport back, and then head back. And then other people will buy their stuff and take it the rest of the way. And there's no really good bypass roads for Baldur's Gate, which the people who have a vested interest in the money that Baldur's Gate makes as a trade hub use their means to make sure that stays true. They're going to use their financial influence to keep any bypass roads from getting built. So in this way, Baldur's Gate becomes this central hub of trade. So when your party gets there, they will probably have a few days. And like I said, if they've played Baldur's Gate 3, they are probably going to want to hang out and do stuff in Baldur's Gate because they're visiting a place that they've visited before, you know what I mean? So what I've been doing ever since Baldur's Gate 3 came out, when I run this, is I use the locations and the NPCs from the game. The players that I've run it with since then love that. They love that they as humans, not their characters, are familiar and feel like they kind of know their way around. Obviously, you're not going to have the same things happening that happen in Baldur's Gate because that stuff is in a different universe and a different timeline. But having like the same shops and the same shopkeepers and stuff like that, the players that I've done it with absolutely love that they as people are familiar with those things already and kind of feel like they know their way around. And I think that helps some people visualize it better because they have run around there in a video game. Frume's contact is a human trader named Akin Celebon. He operates a shop in what's called Blackgate. It's in the outer city north of Baldur's Gate, and that's where most of the people who have freight headed north, where they set up the wagons, where they buy the gear they need, where they get ready to make that caravan trip north to Waterdeep. Akin's shop sells wagons and chains and tools and all the things that you would need to set up a wagon headed north in a caravan. Celebon directs the characters that if they hang out in any of the taverns or saloons near his shop, that they are sure to see all of the northbound traffic. And depending on the timeline, how you work things out with your party, how much time they spent doing all of the different stuff up to this point, eventually within a couple days of them heading north, the party will see members of the cult that they recognize from camp. What I do is each day that they spend watching, I have the party make a perception check, and whenever they roll 15 or higher is when I have them notice. They're going to see them no matter what, but I have them roll so they feel like that they are the reason that they found them, that they succeeded at it, that they did it on their own, that I didn't just give it to them, you know what I mean? So Resmir, Because she's a half dragon, that's apparently bad in this timeline, this version of Baldur's Gate, so she can't openly walk the streets. But it's common for rich elites to travel around the city in a palanquin. Palanquin, whatever. It's one of those things that has the poles and has like what looks like a little tent on top, and people ride in a chair and they have like 4 guys carrying them. I'm going to say palanquin. So Resmir's riding in a palanquin, and the party might catch a glimpse of her. So what I do is if they roll over a 20 on their perception check, they catch a glimpse of her in her palanquin as she's traveling with her guys carrying her. Her group will come to Celebon's shop to buy the wagons and things they need for the trip north and begin preparing. At this point, Celebon is like, okay, it's time. You need to try and get hired either with the cult, which the book says would be reckless, which makes perfect sense because if they recognize those people from the camp, there's a chance they recognize them back. The safer and smarter thing to do is try to get hired as bodyguards for one of the many other merchants and travelers that are headed north. The way that I do it is I describe some of the people from the NPC list that's coming up in this chapter, and the party basically tries out to be bodyguards. It's commonly known that while there are no like official soldiers that take caravans north, all of the merchants who do this know that if each merchant hires 2 or 3 guards and they have a caravan with 15 or 20 wagons, that by the time they've all hired 2 or 3 guards, their caravan will be well protected. So that's just a common thing that always happens. So the book has a neat little chart, I'll throw it up here, where the party is trying out, and you can use either persuasion or athletics to try and impress somebody into hiring you, which I love. So I describe some of the merchants from the list, and I let the party choose who they want to volunteer for, and I encourage them to go to different merchants for multiple reasons. One, because most of these merchants aren't going to be rich enough to hire an entire party, and 2, it gives me a chance to introduce them to more of those NPCs in a more organic, more fluid way than them all working for one guy, knowing that NPC really well, and then having to try and figure out why they're running into these other NPCs. I also love the different roleplay opportunities that the different places on this chart offer, because if you don't get hired on as a guard, yes, you are definitely going to get a chance to get hired later because there will be dangers on the road and some guards will most likely die. 2, if you're just a basic guard, you don't really have that much responsibility. You're a little bit freer to move around. If you are a sergeant and you get to command other troops, that's a fun little special thing for a player to get to do. Everybody I've had that was a sergeant really enjoyed bossing around other guards. And then the bodyguard one means that you end up being like a personal side by side with one of those merchants, and you will get to know that character really well. I mean, you'll interact with them a lot. So they all have their fun little role play wrinkles, and you get to do that with each one of the party members. So this is really neat. Most of this chapter is done really, really, really well. So there are 2 NPCs in this chapter that the book lists as key NPCs. They have a piece of the main story that they're a part of. The first is Azbara Jos. He is a Red Wizard of Thay, and there's a lot of things that go along with that. He has left Thay because he doesn't want to serve under Zhentarim. He looks a little bit silly in my opinion because he's trying to hide his head tattoos by wearing one of those wool caps that has the flaps, which I think sounds adorable on a Red Wizard. But if one of the party members succeeds on a DC 15 perception check, they notice just the edges of his Thay and Wizard tattoos. But make sure you explain to the party that that doesn't automatically mean he's evil. Yes, Thayans are kind of usually up to some shenanigans, but a lot of Thayans fled Thay whenever Zhentarim, the Lich, took over their country, so they're not completely unheard of in the Sword Coast. When he joins the caravan, which is later on, he buys a seat on one of the wagons with the cult, which nobody else has really done, and he doesn't really talk to most of the people except for the guy who seems like he's the leader of the cultist part of the wagon train. So you can see he's kind of definitely connected to them somehow. The other key NPC is Jamna Gleamsilver. She is a gnome, she's obviously a rogue, and you pretty much immediately know that she's up to some sneaky biz, but she is a really fun, really interesting little NPC, and I always have a lot of fun running her. There are 20 other NPCs that the book lists in this caravan. That is a lot, like a lot to manage, especially for one chapter. But I get what they're going for. They want it to feel like a full caravan filled with different random interesting people, and you're going to be traveling with them for weeks. So They want it to feel like this journey with all these people traveling together and this just almost like a moving city. So it's really cool, it's really interesting, but it's a lot for a DM to manage. So I divide these NPCs up into major recurring NPCs, one-time interaction NPCs, and NPCs who are just there for backdrop that are interesting to look at, but there's not a lot to their story. And so you more just describe them. You don't necessarily have to ever interact with them. Now, this all depends on the decisions your party makes, because they might just choose one of the NPCs that doesn't have that much of a story, and they might key on them and want to talk to them all the time. And you're going to have to do a little bit of improv in that situation. But I'll go through exactly how I think you should divide them up and what purpose they should serve in this trip. So the ones I think should be recurring NPCs. Bade Secopol is a male half-elf merchant. He is carrying ale and beer, which doesn't usually make that much money, but it says that he makes his money by selling drinks to travelers as they go. What I do is I describe his wagon as being able to like fold open into a bar. So you basically have a traveling tavern with you and he's like the barkeeper. That's not how the book does it, but I think that makes it more fun and interesting. It basically gives your party a tavern to hang out in each night when the caravan stops. And because Bade is the one running it, he's like the barkeeper, the innkeeper character basically. So I have him function as a recurring NPC in that he's like that innkeeper when the players keep coming back to the tavern to talk to different NPCs each night or whenever they feel like it. He's always there to offer a hint at some rumors or a little bit of a friendly joke. He's just somebody who, when I run this, is involved a lot in interacting with the characters because he runs that moving tavern. The book says Bade is careless with his horses and gear and sort of neglects his animals a little bit, and that can cause friction with people who hate to see animals mistreated. I leave this out because I make him this traveling bartender that sets up the tavern, and I don't want the party to hate him. So it's up to you if you want to include that. I don't. The next recurring NPC I use is Losfius Longnose. He is a male halfling teamster. He does have a rather large nose, but he gets his nickname because he's always sticking his nose into other people's business. He especially enjoys hearing people's embarrassing secrets. Now, it says that he won't stick his nose in where he's not wanted. He's just incredibly curious about what other people are hiding. And it says that as long as he's along for the trip, there is a decent chance that your party will find him snooping through their stuff at some point. Now, the reason why he is typically a recurring NPC in my games is because there are instances where the party is going to want to either find out information about other NPCs or maybe even try to check in other people's wagons because of certain events that happen. And Losfius is a nice way that the party can either pay or talk him into doing some of the more shady business they don't want to do, or trying to pry other people's secrets out of him. He's one of the ways that I will share other NPCs' personal details with the party. So you don't necessarily have to interact with all 20 people. You can find out some of the people's secrets from Losfius. The last NPC I typically use as a recurring NPC is Taiji Skesh. She is a female shield dwarf guard. It says that she's quick to anger and quick to use her weapons when she is angry. She is honest to a fault, so people always know exactly why she's angry, and hopefully she can direct them into correcting their errors in the future. But it says that she will not put up with bullying. So I didn't originally have her as an NPC that was that important in my head when I first ran this, but most of the times that I have done this, people kind of immediately take a liking to her. They like her no-nonsense attitude. Even if she gets upset quick, she always seems justified in what she's upset about. And they really like that she won't let people bully other people. So my parties, even though she's kind of rough around the edges, tend to gravitate towards Taiji. So the last few times that I've run this, I introduce her a little bit earlier on because it's just somebody that the party feels nice having around because they know that she's going to fight for the side of justice. They know that she doesn't care to step in if something bad is happening, and that is going to be helpful when some of these unfortunate events happen along the road. Most of these NPCs fall into the one decent interaction because that's all it really takes to find out who they are, why they're here, and what is interesting about them. Oin Evanmore is a male human merchant. He is traveling with a wagon of exotic birds that he's taking to be sold in Waterdeep. He is stubborn and argumentative and has strong opinions about almost everything, but he's very generous when it comes to buying drinks for other people because he likes having people to argue with. The way I treat him is like he doesn't really care what side of an argument he's on. He just enjoys arguing. And I try to role play him so that my players understand that. So that if any of the players, one, are happy to have free drinks, and two, enjoy debating either philosophical, political, or mundane things, they can have a fun, no real depth, no real story nuance, but just like a fun little back and forth, quip for quip interaction with a not too serious NPC. Alder Unpelhurst is a male human lawyer. He is sleazy, as you would expect a lawyer to be, and he is traveling from Baldur's Gate to literally anywhere else. And there are rumors around the caravan that there was some sort of scandal, which is why he's fleeing Baldur's Gate. The one solid interaction I use him for is that there's an encounter where something gets stolen, and it seems pretty obvious to people who did it. And he steps in and tries to act like he's mitigating stuff, but ultimately he's just sleazy and gross about it. And he's just somebody really for the party to dislike. You gotta have those people. Eldkin Agatul is a female shield dwarf guard. She's made this trip several times. She's a perfectionist. She does everything right, and she wants everybody to know it. She's just there to be annoying. You just want to have one interaction where she's belittling somebody for doing something slightly differently than she would have done it. That way the party's like, oh, there are people to dislike along this trip as well. Enom Tobun is a male Lightfoot halfling teamster. He's been traveling with freight caravans all over the Sword Coast for 40 years, and he tells all kinds of fantastical stories, and it's difficult to tell where the truth ends and the fiction begins. He's a great storyteller, but if anybody challenges him on the validity of any of his stories, he gets really upset and sullen and pulls back in on himself. What I like to do is, one of the encounters later is about this beautiful golden stag with platinum antlers. I have him tell that story, and if one of the party members doesn't challenge him on the validity of it, I have an NPC do it to see him get upset because they don't believe his story. The fun part is, the story's true. Green Imsa is a female human traveler. The reason she's called Green Imsa is incredibly obvious because she is green. Her skin, her hair, her teeth, her nails, her eyes, all green. I used to just have her in the background characters, but every time I've run this, the party can't help but ask her about why she's green, which, when asked about, she gets flustered. She's heading to Waterdeep to see if there's a mage up there who can take her greenness away. She never will tell what happened to cause her to be green. She just seems super self-conscious about whatever it is. She's nice, but she's shy and quiet, so she doesn't really have a lot to her story because the book doesn't explain it, but your party is going to want to talk to her. They're going to want to find out why she's green. So she's going to be in that one interaction category. Leda Widris is a female human guard. She's as honest and courageous as a mercenary comes. She has spent a ton of time working and traveling around the south, and she's decided that she wants to head north because she wants to know what a truly cold wind feels like on her face. She's not like the most interesting, but just if your party sees, especially your female players, they see this hardy, rugged female warrior with like this kind of long away gaze, like she's staring toward a possible future, they tend to want to ask her what her story is. There's not much to it, but you can give them a little bit of that, you know, that she's a mercenary, she's done her fair bit of work in the South and is eager to see what cold feels like. It won't be a big, important interaction, but it's just a nice moment to get another flavor of character that's along this journey with them. Naorite Verther is a male human merchant. He has a shipment of Kalashite silk and is bragging about how rich it's going to make him when he sells it in Waterdeep. The problem is he didn't inspect it close enough whenever he bought it, and it's actually infected with worms. And if anybody points this out to him along his journey, he becomes unhinged in his anger and grief, which obviously the party will probably have to take part in helping mitigate. What I like to do is, at some point along the trip, have one of the party members roll a perception check, and they are the one who notices that his silk is infected, so they have the moral choice. Do they tell him or do they not? And then they have to deal with the ramifications of whatever choice they make. Orvustia Esserin is a female human guard. She seems like she could handle her spear and bow well, but she knows nothing of the world beyond her aunt's farm or about people who deal dishonestly. Her aunt, being a wise lady, thinks that this trip will be good for her. So what I do with her is I have the party see somebody cheating her out of something in some way, whether it's a game of chance or a deal that the party can easily tell she's kind of getting screwed over. But they can also tell that she's so innocent and trusting that she has no idea it's happening. So then there's another moral choice. Is the party going to get involved, which they typically do, and try to protect her from making this naive mistake? And then they deal with the ramifications of that. And obviously she's going to be grateful and then kind of open up and admit how she's sheltered. She's only lived on this farm and about her aunt sending her on this journey, and thank them for intervening on her behalf. Radisir Parathun is a male rock gnome traveler. He is very quiet, he keeps to himself, nobody really knows where he's headed. He spends most of his time riding in the back of his wagon and looking backwards at the road as if he's thinking of days gone by. The one thing that will draw him out of his wagon is a game of chance. So parties always in any game I've ever run, if they get a chance to gamble, they love it. So one night along their journey at a random point that you feel it's nice to have a little bit of levity in between the other more harrowing events, I have him uncharacteristically show up at the fire. He's there trying to get people to play a game of chance. You can use one of the games from the DMG. You can steal Critical Roles games if you want. You can look up online. There's a ton of people who have come up with ways to do gambling for D&D using your dice. But either way, it's going to be a fun little moment of levity for the party, and that's the only time they're really going to interact with him. And the last NPC in this one interaction category is Werun Torahar. She is the best wagon driver on the tradeway. She can handle a team of horses or mules better than anybody, whether it's mud, ice, stones, nothing seems to bother her. She seems to have an uncanny knack for getting her animals to understand exactly what she wants them to do. She also, in her heart, is a starry-eyed romantic, and she can bring even strong men to tears with her tales of long ago lost love and thwarted passion. Usually whenever the party notices her incredible ability to drive a wagon and to handle animals, somebody in the party is going to want to talk to her and ask about where she learned her skills or if she can train them, and that's when you get your chance to explain more about who she is. The last category of NPCs along this trip is characters who are just backdrop. You don't really ever need to interact with them. You can just describe them there, the party seeing what they're up to or seeing them at all, and that's enough just to fill out more of the flavor of being on this big long caravan with all these different interesting people. The first of these is Akreni Ulielton. He's a large, boorish man who's ill-mannered. He's not mean or anything. He's just vulgar, smelly, and completely without manners. His wagon has cured furs and uncured hides. The next member of this group is Eldelri Lewell. She is a female moon elf merchant. She is carrying exotic wood up from Chult to be made into fancy furniture in Waterdeep. It says that she has not very much patience for people, but she is very particular about her gear and is especially caring for her animals. That is neat. The party may want to interact with her more because of that, but she's always going to kind of brush people off. She doesn't really care what you have to say, but she is somebody that the party will probably admire for her attention to her animals. Lai Angustum is a male gold dwarf merchant. He's carrying scented oils and exotic perfumes from Am in the hopes that he can sell them to the rich dandies in Waterdeep and make a huge profit. He constantly talks about money, how much he's going to make, how he's going to spend it, and that people are going to respect him when he has it. But he's super cheap. He will not even spend a copper to buy someone else a drink along the trip. Not somebody the party is probably going to want to interact with, so you can just describe him and the way he behaves at some point in the tavern or another part of the trip, and the characters, that'll be enough. Okay, another guy who's kind of not somebody we want to hang out with. Lasfero the Silent is a male human merchant. He's probably the most interesting of these backdrop characters. He is always sitting there just quiet, brooding, riding on his wagon, and he almost doesn't even seem to be breathing. His wagon, nobody knows what he's transporting, but he has a gargoyle that's tethered to it that's guarding it. The interesting thing about him is that occasionally he will just shift drastically into these moods where he will sing and tell jokes. He apparently has a beautiful tenor voice and his jokes are always hilarious, but these gregarious moods are very short. And then he goes right back to being sullen and silent. So your party is probably not going to want to interact with him when he is quiet. And you may have one or two moments during the trip where he comes out with some hilarious joke. And the party will enjoy that, but they won't even get time to interact with him because he'll go right back to being brooding. So he's a fun little flavor piece to add some depth to the trip, but he's not going to have a real strong interaction with the party. Nuhar Selalim is a male moon elf merchant. He is traveling with his mute brother Selvik. Selvik is mute, so he never talks. And Nuhar is very talkative, very loquacious, but if you pay attention, he never really has anything to say. He's just talking for talking's sake. So it's fun to describe these guys. They're a neat little set piece, but they don't have anything worth saying for the party to listen to. Samardag the Hoper is a male human merchant. He's carrying porcelain on a rocky road, so you would think he would be a little more nervous, but to this guy, the sky is always blue, the outlook is always bright, he is an endless optimist. So obviously dealing with him is super annoying to every human who has any flaws. It says that he would hold on to his money, but he has a soft spot for urchins, so he's constantly giving away. So he's just a great guy, but he's too perfect. He's nice for the party to see him, like, okay, cool, I love that you're always smiling, but we've all had a friend in our lives who smiled too much, who was too bright and cheery all the time, and it gets old fast. The last backdrop character is Saluzdag the Pole. In his homeland of Shar, his name means tall as a lodge pole, but on the Sword Coast, he's just known as the Pole. He is 7'5", so he's likely the tallest human any of the party has ever seen. He doesn't talk much, but because he's so big, when he does talk, people listen. So there's not much to him. It's interesting for the party to see this super tall, this like almost half giant looking guy, but that's all you need to know about him. There's a super tall dude on the trip with us. Interesting, not much depth to it. So this is how I divide them. You do it how you want, but this is a lot of NPCs to manage, and I find that dividing them up like this makes it a little bit easier to handle. The stretch of road from Baldur's Gate to Waterdeep is 750 miles. The wagons can travel about 15 miles a day, but the animals have to rest 1 out of every 6 days in order to recover from their work. So altogether, the trip is going to take about 2 months. This seems crazy because 2 months passing in your world doesn't happen very often, but this trip is a really fun montage where there are events happening, there are days where nothing happens, and you can kind of just cut seeing the days where travel goes uneventful, and it just has a fun, different vibe to it that your party will really enjoy. So there are 3 Cult of the Dragon wagons, and they do not associate with each other during the trip. The only thing that anybody could see that they have in common is that they're all a part of this caravan. They don't travel together. They don't camp together at night. They do all turn down other travelers that try to buy seats on their wagons, even though they have room. Resmir apparently took a group of cultists and got horses and rode ahead. She's headed up to Castle Neriatar in the Mire of Dead Men. You won't see her again until chapter 6. She did leave 12 guards as a part of the caravan, 1 for each of the wagons, and then 9 that are split up into 2 separate groups that are just disguised as travelers, also pretending not to know each other. I make my party roll insight checks to see if they can pick out who in the caravan is associated with the cult and who isn't. The book says that there are 2d4 other wagons in the caravan, but that they are not all merchants. It could be a family traveling north or a diplomat on a mission to Waterdeep. So this is 2d4 random wagons on top of all the NPCs, their carts, their wagons that have already been described. And there are also people in the caravan who don't have wagons. Some people ride horses, some people just walk beside the wagons, and some people pay merchants and other people to ride on their wagons. The caravan travels for about 8 hours a day, though it will stop for people to eat and water the horses and things like that. And most small towns along the road have an inn designed for travelers on this path because it's a very busy tradeway. And there are little hostelries built in between towns that people can stay at, and it's a lot more comfortable than sleeping in your wagon or your tent or whatever. The book says that you can use the map from chapter 5 to do one of these hostelries. I don't like using that map because when you use it again in chapter 5, it just seems like the same old repeat. It seems lazy, and it's a little bit boring to have the same map used for 2 separate locations, and I am lucky enough to have a screen built into my table. One of my players actually built our whole table. His grandpa has a woodworking shop, and he's amazing. I'm super lucky, but I just make my own maps online to use for these encounters, and actually I should have mentioned it in one of the earlier videos. There are not a lot of maps in this book. There are a lot of encounters that don't have maps for them, but if you look online, people have made maps for them. You can make them yourself. I like making them myself. I would not hold it against you and nobody else would either if you just Googled these maps and found maps that other people have made. That's way easier. It's way more convenient. It's up to you. But just so you know, throughout this entire book, there are not a whole lot of maps. The most dangerous part of the trip north is actually the first little bit. You go through an area called the Fields of the Dead, and locals say that you shouldn't start fires on hilltops in this area because it'll attract monsters from miles around. I like to lean into that. I like to make this area a little more dangerous. When I have them roll their percentiles for a chance of a random encounter, the chance is a little bit higher in this area. I don't bog this trip down with a whole lot of random encounters because there are so many cool things happening already, but a couple here and there is neat. And the caravan has dozens of guards, so unless an overwhelming force attacks, this caravan is going to be perfectly fine, and you can run just a couple of rounds of combat, not have this big bogged down hours long combat with dozens of enemies. Yeah, you can have dozens of enemies attack, but most of the caravan guards are taking care of it themselves, and your party can fight just like a few undead or whatever you want to have attack them. I like to have that. That way the party realizes there are dangers and that at any time the caravan could get attacked. But I also like them having that vibe of like, we're in a caravan, we're all in this together, and we are all protecting each other, which will make it even more fun when there are social situations that kind of turn people against each other, because it gives that vibe like, oh, there's problems in the homestead. So the book within the same page says that the journey is going to last 2 months, and then a few paragraphs later says that the journey is going to take 40 days. No, months are not 20 days in Faerun, they're 30 days. The reason it says 40 days is because it wants you to make 40 checks on this chart where you roll a d20 once per day. If you roll 16 or higher, you have an encounter. If you roll a 20, you have 2 encounters. And that's how they tell you to plan out the random events that they have listed as possible encounters throughout this next section of this chapter. If you've watched this far, you know that I don't like leaving things like that up to chance. I like to pick out my encounters, my random encounters included, and plan them out. Because if you just leave things up to chance, there's a possibility you have like 3 or 4 combat encounters and no roleplay encounters, or vice versa, and that's not a lot of fun. I like to structure things where I get equal amounts combat, roleplay, and exploration. So the way that I handle it is, like I said earlier, I have them roll percentiles, depending on how dangerous the area is, for random encounters that are not these encounters that they have in the book, but the 12 encounters that they have in the book, I actually have divided into categories just like the NPCs. This chapter does a really good job of giving you a lot of meat to work with, but not a lot of direction on how to put things together. They, again, just like chapter 1, kind of expect people to have a really strong handle on DMing and have a strong background of DM experience. They're not giving support to newer DMs, in my opinion, the way that they should. So I will say that order isn't super important, but the 3 categories are those that you should absolutely include because they're either just great or they have a strong narrative component. Those that are fun, but you don't necessarily have to run them. They're just cool. If you skip them, it's not a big deal. And then there are 2 that are potentially problematic, and when you read them, you can kind of tell that this book was written like 10 years ago. First of these necessary encounters is called the Golden Stag. As the caravan is traveling, there is a herd of deer spotted. Typically, whenever this happens, those on the caravan that are trained for hunting will go get some meat to sustain the caravan on its journey north. However, in this herd is a magnificent stag with golden fur and platinum antlers. Immediately, everybody in the camp who can wield a bow is going to want to try to hunt this thing down. There are a few people in the caravan who think that this stag is probably blessed by a god and that killing it would be bad luck for the caravan. The party can either join the hunt and try and chase it down, try to talk people out of hunting it, though they're only probably going to be able to persuade a few people, ignore the situation altogether, or head out there to protect the stag from the hunters. Most parties that I've run this for, whether they were intending on killing the stag or protecting it, they took off after it to try to find it. It's only a DC 10 survival check to track it, and after you travel a little ways, you find it in a forest in these old overgrown ruins. Now, the book gives you 3 options on how you could handle what happens next. If you want it to just be a normal animal stag that happens to have these unique fur and antlers, and the party intends to hunt and kill it, they can do that. But if they do, the local farmers raise a little militia with torches and pitchforks, and they approach the caravan and tell them that Stag brought them good luck and that they demand 500 gold in repayment for what they've lost. That's not what you should do. Options 2 and 3 are both great, and what I do is I combine them both together. Option 2 is the Stag turns and begins to speak to them in Sylvan. If nobody speaks Sylvan, it will start speaking Elvish, which chances are somebody in your party probably speaks. If nobody speaks Elvish, it will kind of sigh and begin speaking in broken common. It tells the party that they are on the right track and that they must continue to follow the river of gold until they reach the castle in the sky. It does say that sadly, their journey will be riddled with hardship and bloodshed, but it offers them a +1 magical bow to aid in their journey, and the bow just kind of shimmers and appears. I always make the bow look like platinum antlers, like the handle, and then there's platinum antlers for the arms of the bow. And then it begins to fade away, and as it fades away, it says one last thing: not all will survive. The third option is that when the Stag gets to the ruins, he transforms into a young elven male. The book says he's naked and he either has an antler headpiece or antlers growing out of his head. You can put clothes on him. That's not really important to the story. But he says that the father of the woman he loved cursed him, that if he ever left the walls of his castle, that he would turn into a stag, and that happened so long ago that the kingdom of which his castle was a part is no longer even remembered. He wishes to travel to find a wizard who can cure him of his curse, but every time he leaves, people try to kill him for his golden coat. He tells the party that if they help him travel to Waterdeep to seek his cure, that he will do his best to reward him. The book says that this will be difficult because people in the caravan find the story ridiculous and want to kill the stag for its fur and antlers. And that if the party succeeds, that he can't reward them, but everybody gets 500 XP, which you should be doing milestone leveling, so that XP means nothing. This is why I combine 2 and 3. I have him turn into an elf. I have him kind of be a little bit, your mind is going to be a little messed up after thousands of years, however long it's been that he's been cursed. So I still have him kind of give those prophecies from option 2, and I have him ask for them to protect him. And if the party does and succeeds, which it will be difficult, then when he's turned back, his antlers transform into that magic bow that I described earlier. I love this because it is an interesting story, it's a difficult challenge, and it has that classic, unique, kind of weird D&D fantasy vibe. Plus, your party gets an awesome weapon, and as I said before, they have a sweet story on how they got the weapon. The second of these necessary encounters is called Payback. As the caravan travels, they see what looks like a severed head in the middle of the road 600 feet in front of them. Anybody with a passive perception of 15 or higher can tell that it's actually a person buried up to their neck, and this becomes obvious once you get within 30 feet. On their forehead is painted the word Oathbreaker. They're unconscious, but they're still alive. And a DC 10 medicine check will revive them. But also, if you give them any healing of any kind, magic, healing word, whatever, that will also wake him up. Some of the NPCs in the caravan will feel that if somebody took the time and effort to bury this guy and mark him as a traitor, that he should be just left to his fate. And there are wagon tracks that show that other people have passed him by. And if your party is employed by different NPCs, at least one of their employers is among the group that thinks you should leave them. Most parties are going to dig this guy out. I only had one party who didn't, and they were one of the more chaotic groups that I've run for. This was not the worst thing that they did. The book says digging him out takes 2 diggers, 2 hours, so 4 man-hours total. And then it takes another hour for the 2 diggers to fill the hole back in, because you can't just leave a hole in the road. That time isn't really that important because, like I said, this chapter takes 2 months. So it's not really going to be that big of a deal to the party how long it takes to dig him out. I mean, they're not digging him themselves. The man is named Carlon Amethel. He has the spy stat block, and he will publicly tell everyone that the oath he broke was that he was supposed to marry this lady, but he found out that her dad and brothers were all bandits, and that when they got married, he was supposed to join them and become a bandit. So when he backed out, they buried him. When the party's digging him up, they will see a Harper symbol tattooed on his arm. If one of the parties is a member of the Harpers at this point and reveals that to Amethel, he will tell them the real story. That he was, much like the party, a part of a caravan that had a Cult of the Dragon wagon in it, and that while they were traveling, he passed some information off to another Harper at a roadside inn. The cultists saw the meeting, and they tried to convince the rest of the caravan that he was passing information to bandits. The rest of the caravan wasn't willing to execute him for it, so they came to the agreement that they would bury him and let Providence decide his fate. The big reward for this is that Amethel has Harper contacts in Waterdeep and can be a useful resource whenever the party reaches there. I usually save this one until a little bit later because some of the other encounters are more fun if you don't have this extra Harper ally along, because he's not super powerful but powerful enough. It's nice to have Amethel with the party because it gives you a chance as the DM to kind of have a little bit of not influence on what the party does, but they will definitely ask him questions about things if he has knowledge of things, and it gives you a chance to share lore or information that you want to get to the party without it just being like you're telling them outside of the game. You can tell them things through Amethel and it will feel more organic. And this is actually one of the main reasons for NPCs to exist. So always have lore or information the party needs either be found in written things that the party finds or be given to them from NPCs. Never just tell your players something as a DM. That's lame and boring. The next encounter I see as necessary is absolutely not narratively focused at all. It's just really clever and fun and amazing, and I love it. It's Fungus Humongous. So after a couple of days of heavy rain, the party wakes up one morning and the whole ground in every direction is carpeted with fungus. Anytime someone steps on one, which is basically impossible not to do, it puffs with a little cloud of dark smoke, and it screeches with pain. These are like tiny shriekers. There's actually a giant mycelium that's underground in some caverns, and it has spread this fungus to the surface. It's a DC 15 to identify these fungus as basically harmless shriekers, but if you roll between a 10 and 14, you actually wrongly identify them as poisonous, which I think is hilarious. Even if the party identifies them, the merchants are terrified of them, because they still are afraid that they might be poisonous, and on top of that, the shrieking sounds make the animals super skittish and they won't want to travel through it. The mushrooms are growing so fast that in the morning when you first see them, they're the size of a cork. An hour later, they're 6 inches tall, and an hour after that, they're a foot tall. Their growth slows down after that, but if it gets that far, by then, most of the caravan assumes that they are all doomed. And it's fun as the DM to roleplay all these people freaking out, and it's literally harmless. So it's kind of this fun encounter where the party has to kind of manage this building mass hysteria, which is not an encounter that happens in very many D&D games. And it's a different, interesting, fun problem for the party to solve, and it's always a fun time. Anyone can literally sweep the mushrooms out of the way with like a stiff broom or a scythe or a tree branch. Every character involved in this process, though, has to make a DC 10 Constitution saving throw or be overcome with feelings of grief and remorse. You would think this is because of hearing thousands of tiny little death screams, but it's actually because they're being mildly poisoned from the toxin in the spores. Anyone who is affected by this, after 1d20 minutes, breaks down and can no longer continue the process. And whoever is affected by it has bad nightmares for days after, until all of the toxin is out of their system. It takes 6 total man hours to clear the fungus. The party can divide that up however they want. Usually most of the party succeeds on that save, so it's not really that big of a deal to get out of here. But it's just a fun, silly, different style encounter that I really enjoy including. The next encounter that you have to include is called Contraband. Basically, this is really simple. One of the cult wagons hits like a rock in a bend in the road, and the wagon dumps over. One of the crates that dumps out cracks open, revealing dozens of pieces of jewelry wrapped in fur for protection. The party and some NPCs can help them gather their stuff up and repair their wagon. This is a good way for the party to see some of the contraband that the cult has, though it's not really that important to see what they have. I mean, everybody knows they're stealing valuables by this point. But the cultists get pretty upset about it because Rezmir told them to keep that stuff secret, and the NPCs who saw what was in the cart, the cult might want to silence them, so people will all of a sudden wake up dead. You know what I mean. And it's a DC 10 medicine check to tell that they were poisoned. It says that also the cultists might direct some of these attacks at the party. Make a DC 10 Constitution saving throw one night, and if they succeed, they're fine. If they fail, then they wake up not feeling well. They take a couple points of poison damage. They have the poison condition for that day, but they realize that somebody tried to poison them. This is fun. This is cool. I also tie this in with one of the planned road events the book has later called Recognized, where one or two of the cult members recognize a couple of the party members, and over the course of time, they try to work against you. This is basically a piece of that. So this I use as the start of that. Like whenever you're picking up, I have one of the cultists kind of look at the party member a little too closely and then act like nothing's wrong. And then this poisoning is the first step on that recognized encounter that kind of goes on through the travel. And I'll describe that in more detail when we get to that part. Another encounter I always include is everything has a price. What happens is an NPC will take a liking to some rare or valuable piece of equipment that one of the party members has and will offer to buy it from them, but for like a way too low price. And when the party member refuses, they become more pushy and more obnoxious until just storming off. Don't steal a party member's weapon or a piece of armor, but do steal something that they will care about missing, especially like a magic item that they really enjoy having, because you want it to matter. You want them to care, really care that this thing got stolen. So in the morning, when they most likely accuse that person of taking it, that person will get really upset. The party may want to search their belongings. Obviously, that person's going to be indignant because they didn't steal it. Somebody else overheard that conversation and decided it would be a perfect opportunity to steal and have the finger get pointed at somebody else. It's going to be difficult to find that item because you're in this huge caravan and nobody's going to want you to just go rifling through their things. So what I do is I have Losvius the Longnose approach the party after. He tells the party that he would be willing to covertly search that person's belongings to see if they have the item in return for a reward. I usually have him ask for 50 gold. But when he does, he doesn't find the item. So they find out that person doesn't have it, but they don't know who does. And then I have Losvius say that he'll do some checking around. He'll try and figure out maybe if anybody slips up and mentions it or brags about it to somebody else. He'll do some spy work for the party, again, for a reward. And then eventually I have him say that there are a couple of people who most likely stole it, that they've seemed kind of sleazy in their dealings. The two people I have him suspect are Alder, the sleazy lawyer, and Orustia, the innocent farm girl. And then when the party questions them, they are going to obviously think that it's probably the sleazy lawyer. But the way that I have it is that the farm girl actually took it and she was going to give it back. She just wanted to have it, to look at it, to kind of, whatever it is, wear it or put it on or wave it around to kind of feel like a real adventurer, and that she always intended to give it back. So when the party pressures her enough, she will break down and be like, I'm so sorry, I was going to give it back. I only wanted to try it out. But the party's obviously probably going to put a lot of pressure on that sleazy lawyer. They may even force him to show them his belongings. So this is a fun little role play guilt with a little bit of a twist, but it just gives the party a chance to interact with some of these NPCs, to really use their insight rolls, their persuasion rolls, and to just get ingrained in kind of a messy little social thing to where they feel more like they know some of these NPCs, and to kind of learn that things are not going to always be as they seem along this trip. The last encounter that I always include is called No Room at the Inn. After a long, wet, cold day, they arrive at this large inn. When they head inside, the common room is warm and cozy and inviting. And as they try to make arrangements with the innkeeper to stay, he tells them with a hint of embarrassment that the entire inn has been rented out, including the common room, for a private party. When the party looks around, they see only one group: an aristocrat judge and his 3 lackeys. The party can hear them kind of snickering and saying things under their breath like, sleep tight and have a good evening. If the party inquires about sleeping in the stables, which would still be better than the wagons, the judge is like, oh no, our horses are very particular about who they sleep with. We had to rent that all out as well. And as the party leaves, they are kind of laughing and snickering at them. And after the party leaves, they will continue to jeer and insult the caravan from the windows because they think the whole situation is hilarious. I love this because it provides this moral decision. It is really frustrating for the party. And the book says that even if the party doesn't start a fight, that potentially one of the NPCs will. I don't do that. I like to make it the party's choice. Everybody else will grumble. They'll be upset. They may even encourage the party like, hey, you guys could do something about this. But I won't have an NPC start that fight. I let the party handle this moral choice. Like, is it worth letting everyone in their caravan suffer in the cold? Or should they just go beat these guys up, basically? The book says that they're actually 4 veterans in disguise. The only reason I think they do that is so that they have a little bit of combat ability in their stat block. Most of my parties actually have chosen just to leave these guys alone, go about their business, sleep in the cold, and ignore them. That chaotic party I mentioned earlier, that is not the choice they made. The next group of encounters is the ones that are fun, but you don't necessarily have to do. Most of these are combat, but the first one isn't. The first one is called Adventuring Life, and this encounter should be kind of folded into one of these other combat encounters. So what this is when they're staying at one of the roadside inns, there are a group of other adventurers who, based on their boasting, must be some of the most talented, ferocious warriors in all of Faerun. And the next morning, at least one of the party's employers will tell them that their services are no longer required because they hired more experienced warriors. It's this group. This other party is actually a group of actors who are high on charisma, but their weapons and armor are shiny stage props, and they're just gambling that there won't be any danger between here and the destination. And whenever trouble does eventually show up, they immediately buckle under the pressure. You can tell that there is not a warrior or a wizard among them. And when the party inevitably rescues their former employer and this group of idiots, he offers to hire them back on at increased wages. I typically fold this in with the next fun but not necessarily encounter, Bane of the Mountains, which all this is that 2 peritons circle high above the caravan. Most people just think that they're eagles, but if somebody succeeds on a DC 15 nature check, they can tell that they're peritons. All this does is if they succeed, before the first dive attack, they realize what they are, and if they don't succeed, their first dive attack is a surprise. How I do it is I have the peritons focus on that merchant and the group of actors that are pretending to be warriors. That way, it's a great way to reveal that they are not who they say they are and let your party come in, save the day. Obviously, other guards and NPCs that are on the caravan will also jump in to help fight. Peritons can be kind of a pain in the butt because of their flyby attack, and if you don't have ranged weapons, you're not really going to be able to attack them. So yes, other NPCs will jump in, let the party carry the weight of the combat, but if it's dragging out too long or if they're struggling because they may not have a lot of ranged attacks, let those other guards, let them help the party out and get this sorted out. It shouldn't be a big deal. I mostly use it just to reveal those actors. The next optional but super fun encounter is the Spider Woods. The tradeway skirts around the huge trollbark and misty forests, but there are a bunch of small wooded areas that it also passes through. Whenever the caravan is in one of these areas, 3 ettercaps and 2 giant spiders will come out of the woods. 2 of the ettercaps will try to take 2 of the horses. It takes 3 rounds for them to cut the horses free and begin to lead them away with reins made out of webbing. While they're doing that, one of the ettercaps and the 2 giant spiders hold the guards at bay. If they can get away with the horses, they lead them away. If the party follows quickly, which they will, it's a DC 10 survival check to follow their path through the woods, and this will lead them to the ettercap's lair about a half a mile away. If the party rushes straight in, they will have to fight all 3 ettercaps and the 2 giant spiders. If they stop and observe for a few moments, the ettercaps will shoo the giant spiders away and begin preparing for their meal. But if they wait too long, the ettercaps are going to start slaughtering and eating the horses. But if they attack the ettercaps after the spiders leave and before they start to slaughter the horses, then they have 6 rounds to kill the ettercaps before the giant spiders return at the noise of combat. 6 rounds should be enough time, but depending on the rolls, it may not work out. They may end up fighting them all. But until they get the horses back, the caravan is stranded because that wagon can't move without them. This is super fun. It's not got a whole lot of narrative, but it's always a really fun little break of the monotony. The last of these optional, basically combat encounters is called Stranded. There is a noble and his 3 guards that are under his wagon with crates pulled around for cover, and they're being besieged by a hobgoblin captain and 6 other hobgoblins. They have wolf furs and wargs painted on their shields. They're Urshani hobgoblins. They look a little more fierce than typical hobgoblins. And they are basically keeping these guys under siege and waiting for darkness so they can use the cover of darkness to charge the wagon. If the party chooses to get involved, they basically have to drive the hobgoblins off, probably slaying them. And then the book says they can tend to the injured, which it doesn't really say who's injured or how, but I usually just have one of the guards have a bad leg wound from one of the hobgoblins that either with magical healing or with a DC 10 medicine check, the party can make better. Then the problem is his horses are gone. So he will buy horses if anybody's willing to sell them. That's up to you. Or he will ask for a ride to the next hostelry where he can get supplies, and he will leave his 3 guards to protect the wagon. This isn't really that narratively important. It's just a fun little combat to throw in if the travel is getting a little monotonous, or based on your pacing, you feel like your party could use a little bit of combat and to break up these other encounters that you've been having. Every table is different. Use your judgment to decide if they need this combat or not. So as I mentioned, there are 2 of these encounters that are potentially problematic. I have multiple groups. The 2 main groups I run for most of the time is my best friend, our wives, and my 9-year-old daughter. I did not run these 2 encounters when I ran this game for them. My other main group is a group of my friends from the factory I work at who are 30-something males, factory workers, and our friend who's a cop. So they are pretty desensitized, so I did run these encounters for them. So judge your table. Hopefully you and your party had a session 0, and if anybody had any subject matter that they were uncomfortable with, they already told you. So if you didn't do that, you may want to leave these out, or if you have anybody that you think might have a problem with it, just talk to them. You don't have to talk to them in front of everybody if you're worried about embarrassing them, but pull them aside, say, hey, one of these is a little bit not sexual, but it could be kind of seen that way. And one of them involves animal cruelty. So just make sure that you know your party and what they're comfortable with. It's not fun to be playing D&D and going along having fun as a player, and then all of a sudden you have like real life memories that get brought up because of something that's happening in the game, and all of a sudden your character's not uncomfortable anymore, you are. So as a DM, you kind of have a responsibility not to make people uncomfortable. Yes, it's a fantasy game. Yes, it's fiction. Yes, make them uncomfortable in ways that are purely fictional, but you don't want to make people actually feel bad in real life. You know what I mean? So just keep that in mind before running these last 2 encounters. And if you don't want to even watch these 2 encounters, I'll throw a timestamp up so you can skip to the next part of the video. But the first of these 2 encounters is literally called Animal Abuse. Basically, there's a noble traveling with the caravan who routinely mistreats and neglects his horses. He lets their harnesses chafe. He doesn't give them enough to eat. He whips them when they're exhausted and struggling to pull as fast as he would like. And actually, if the party still has their horses, he will talk admiringly about them and offer to buy them from the party to replace one of his useless nags, which I think is a nice narrative little hook to put in there, like, oh, let me have one of your horses. I'll take such good care of it. Like, you're digging in right there. So obviously the party is not going to do that. If the party doesn't intervene before, eventually one of his horses collapses in its harness, and he will either beat the horse or cut it loose and leave it there to die in the road. At this point, every party I've had that I've run this with, they got pretty upset and wanted to punish this guy for his actions. He does have a knight and a mage with him, but that has not stopped any of my parties from seeking justice. So you can see why that would be triggering to some people. The other problematic encounter is called Roadside Hospitality, and in this one you can really tell that the book was written like a decade ago. You run up on these 2 buxom, yes, the book says buxom, twin sisters, Arietta and Zelina Inavar. And they are super nice to the party. They are just setting up camp and tending to their horses, and they take a liking to some of the members of the caravan, possibly even members of the party. They are asking them about their history. They're just being super amiable and friendly, and they will either go ahead and spring their trap that night, or they will travel with the caravan for a few days and then do it. Either way, when the time comes, they will wait till after dark, and then from a distance, they will try to lure somebody away from the rest of the caravan, and they will call for help in a familiar voice. They are not twin sisters. Well, they might be, I don't know. But they're doppelgangers, not humans. And whenever the party member goes out there, they will attack him. Luckily for the caravan, if one of them is defeated, the other one flees. But with doppelgangers, you could have some fun. If one of the party members goes out there by himself, what I do is, once the fighting starts, the rest of the party will hear it, and when they run out there, one of the sisters will change their appearance to look like that party member, and then I have the party rolling insight checks to figure out which one of the people is actually their ally and which one is the doppelganger transformed. So that is a lot of fun. When I did this with my party of factory workers, one of them was like, oh, this fair maiden needs help. I'm going to be a noble hero. And he headed out there. And of course, she greeted him very invitingly. And you should have seen the look on his face when she stabbed him in the neck. So there are 4 encounters that the book refers to as planned road events. The first one of these is recognized. I mentioned it earlier. At the beginning of your trip, you have your party make a charisma check, and whoever rolls the lowest, eventually at some point on the journey, when it makes narrative sense, they get recognized by one of the cult members that's riding with the wagon. This makes sense because if your party recognized them whenever you were preparing for the trip from camp, then it would only make sense for them to be able to recognize 1 or 2 of the party members from camp. The book also says that you can just dispense with the die roll and have one of the cultists recognize a party member for the sake of using this encounter. And mechanically what you do is you have that party member roll a DC 15 insight check. If they succeed, they notice that cultist kind of watching them, kind of paying attention to who they talk to and where they sleep. And that if the party member doesn't do anything, doesn't act on this knowledge, that cultist will either attempt to assassinate them or try and cause an accident to eliminate them. And the book says that the only permanent solution to this problem is murder, which I don't agree with, and that the party member should want to eliminate that problem before he shares what he knows. If this runs on for days, the chances of him not telling the other cultists is pretty slim. But how I handle this is, I tie it in with what I was talking about earlier when the wagon wheel breaks and their stuff spills out. That's when the cultist first recognizes the party member. I have them roll the insight check then, and if they notice then, they see him kind of eyeballing them a little suspiciously. Then I have them poison the food like I described in that other encounter. If that doesn't work, after that, if the party member doesn't do anything, after a couple of days, I have them go ahead and do the wagon wheel thing. So I have it be like this escalating event, and I don't do these all at once. I intersperse them through the other encounters. So it gets steadily worse over the course of time. So it's like an underpinning, like a B arc through the traveling. It's not just these things happen bang, bang, bang. And then once that wagon wheel accident doesn't eliminate the character, eventually, if the party member doesn't do anything, the cultist resorts to trying to assassinate him in his sleep. Hopefully, the party member survives. They probably will. And they will either fight to the death, which is where this could end in killing. But it is possible that if they choose to act before it gets to that point, they could come up with another solution, such as they could grab him and intimidate him and tell him that he better not tell anybody, and if he does, then they'll kill him. Or they can question him to find out how much he knows about them. And when the party does this, I basically have it that he doesn't know that they're a member of the Harpers or the Order of the Gauntlet. He just thinks they're a deserter who left, and they want to punish the character for leaving the cult. And at that point, they can try to convince him to leave them alone and just let them go their way, or they can resort to violence if they wish. Or I had a party who they chose to grab him, drag him off to interrogate him, and when he told them what they wanted, they tied him to a tree and left him. So there are other ways to handle this other than just killing him, which the book says is basically the only option. There's never, in D&D, there is never, ever only one option. Your players will come up with stuff that you never thought of. So there are options, but definitely weave this in for that tension that it builds. So at Daggerford is where Azbara Jose and Jamna Gleamsilver join the Caravan, and a day after that you run the event Unwanted Attention. The book says that you have your party member roll an insight check to tell what Jamna is up to, but it says they can also roll deception to be able to tell that somebody else is using deception on them, but that is not how that works. Don't roll deception. You can't use deception for that. If the party rolls 9 or less, they notice nothing weird is going on. With a roll of 10 to 12, they notice that the gnome who recently joined the caravan is paying a lot of attention to the human who joined at the same time. They aren't together, but she often is lingering around close enough to hear conversations whenever you're not traveling, and she's also hanging out around their wagons whenever they are busy doing other activities. With a roll of 13 to 15, they notice that she's paying a lot of attention to the party. She's hanging out, asking innocuous questions, talking about the weather, but they get the vibe that she seems to be listening and remembering details about everything she hears. If they roll 16 or more, they notice both things. She's paying a lot of attention to them and a lot of attention to Azbara Jos. If somebody reveals their Harper badge to Jamna, she says, "Put that away, you fool." The next planned road event is called Who's Your Friend? When the party is 4 days out of Waterdeep, Jamna approaches them while they're having their morning breakfast. She looks around to make sure nobody is watching, puts her finger to her lips, and then grabs somebody's bowl of oatmeal. She digs her little dagger through it and then pulls out a little hunk, almost like a bead, and she tells the party that it is a hunk of bone that is curled up so that the party member will swallow it, but that when it's inside of them, it will slowly uncurl, revealing spikes that will pierce their internal organs and kill them slowly, and that she suspects that it's in all of their meals. And she says for them to meet her that evening to discuss things. She actually placed that little bead on the end of her dagger. I always have her roll sleight of hand against the party's passive perception to see if they notice. That way there is a chance, because things like this shouldn't just automatically happen. The party should get a chance to notice that they're being tricked. Usually she succeeds. If the party members wish to search their breakfast for little bone curls, have them roll a DC 15 investigation check. If they succeed, they find several lumps that could be slivers of bone, or maybe just oat husks or sawdust or insect eggs. Either way, they are probably not going to eat their breakfast. Also, if you really want to make your party nervous, tell them that a couple of the cultists keep glancing over at them but are trying to hide their interest. That evening, after most of the caravan is bedded down for the night, Gleamsilver will come to the party. She'll say that while they do not work for the same people, both of the organizations they're associated with have a vested interest in stopping the Cult of the Dragon. She wants to find out what the cult is carrying and where they're taking it. She enlists the party to try and help her break into their wagons and find out. But if the party already knows, they can tell her, which they will, because they were there in Greenest and we had the crate break open earlier in the travels, so they can just tell her. She will be relieved that she doesn't have to actually go through with breaking in. And if the party doesn't already know, she will point out that Azbara is one of the Red Wizards of Thay. And either way, she will bring up why is a Red Wizard working with the Cult of the Dragon. The book says that she is very cagey about who she works for. She's an operator for the Zhentarim, but she won't come out and say that. She won't straight out lie and say that she's a Harper either. It says that she's extremely talented in picking out subtle clues in conversations so that she can pretend like she knows things that she didn't know and say things that people expect her to say, which this is super fun. It says that if the party makes a DC 15 insight check, that they can tell that she's not completely revealing everything, but it's hard to pinpoint a particular lie. And if they don't succeed, they have no suspicions that she's being dishonest at all. Like I mentioned earlier, I like to give one of the party members, if I have a party member that's a little bit like a rogue or a little bit more open to morally gray, I will actually have her pull that party member aside, address them privately, and offer them membership in the Zhentarim, the same way that other party members got offered membership in the Harpers and the Order of the Gauntlet earlier. I think that this makes for a more well-rounded, more fun, more individual membership than just everybody getting invited to every group. And she's a fun NPC to have along, and it opens more opportunities for her to interact with the party and for the party to get information and have resources from the Zhentarim they wouldn't have otherwise had. The last planned event before the caravan reaches Waterdeep is called Murder Most Foul. 2 days after the Who's Your Friend event, one of the cult's guards will be found dead next to one of their wagons. They were stabbed in the back and left there in the dirt where they fell. Immediately, the cult will accuse the party and ask to inspect their weapons. If one of the party members is carrying a short sword, the wound will match, but that is not damning evidence because any short sword of that style would match that wound. There are footprints around the body, but a DC 10 investigation check reveals that they are all made by the people that are crowding around the scene now, and that likely the ground was swept clean after the murder the night before. By this point in the journey, your party is most likely pretty much seen as heroes around the caravan. They have probably protected them multiple times and solved multiple issues throughout this journey, while the cultists have been standoffish. So many of the NPCs, when the party is accused, will come to their defense. And uncharacteristically, Azbara Jos will actually step forward and try to calm the situation, saying here more words strung together than anyone has heard him say thus far. If the party suggests that they open up their wagons to see if they can figure out what the attacker was after, all accusations will immediately die away. And if the party doesn't do it, an NPC will. In the end, the caravan's most influential merchants decide that without any evidence, there's no way to accuse anyone. and that the gods will punish whoever did this, and life must go on. The cultists, however, will never look at the accused character with anything other than disgust again, and that animosity will come up in Chapter 5. The murder was, of course, Jamna Gleamsilver. She could not resist trying to steal some of that precious loot that the wagons were carrying. The guard interrupted her, and so had to be dealt with. It's just a fact of life in her world. The theft is undetectable because she's such a smooth operator. And with a couple more uneventful days, your caravan reaches Waterdeep. There are a ton of things for your party to do there in the city. The book actually doesn't mention leveling up at the end of this chapter. It doesn't mention leveling up at the end of the next chapter. It doesn't actually mention leveling up again until the end of chapter 6. And at that point it says to level up to 6th level. So nowhere in the book does it actually say to go to 5th level. So because this journey is so long, it takes 2 months in world, and it could potentially take a couple of sessions in your game, I go ahead and let my party level up to 5th level, and this is like a resting spot almost. You know, when you get to Waterdeep, the next couple chapters, they kind of are bang, bang, bang right after each other, so it's difficult to level up in between those. So at this point, make your party level up to level 5. It'll be 2 more chapters before they get to level 6, which leveling should slow down at this point. If you're doing experience points, they don't give a guide for handling certain events or anything like that, like they have in the other chapters. So if you're using experience points, give your party each 100 XP for each of these encounters that they handle. Give them experience for enemies that they defeat, or if they talk an enemy out of fighting or handle a situation without combat, give them experience as though they had won the combat. But as always, you should be doing milestone leveling, so your party reaches 5th level. And with that, you have finished Chapter 4. You're ready to go on to Chapter 5, explore Waterdeep, do all that fun stuff as you continue tracking this cult. If you've made it this far, throw me a like. If you want to keep up with this campaign, other campaigns I've done walkthroughs of, or any of the other videos I like to do, feel free to subscribe. If you like my channel, you like these videos, you want to help me keep making them, you can support my channel by going to my shop, buying some of my fun, silly D&D merchandise. I also have memberships live on my channel. Shout out to GL, Sammy J, Jose, Cody, and Silent Wraith, our channel's members. These videos do take a lot of time and effort and money to produce, and your contribution helps out a lot. Here are some other videos I've done that you guys might like. Thanks, guys, and God bless you.